Hello, welcome back. If you've been here before, if not, hi, my name is David. I make videos talking about media that I want to talk about. This is my series called Fear Entity Exploration, based off of the Magnus Archives, which is a horror podcast written by Jonathan Sims and Alistair J. Newell. This series is going to be looking at every single entity in the Magnus Archives, exploring how they're implemented within the show. I will be analyzing 3 different episodes that I've chosen, talking about why these episodes are great showcases of that specific dread power, along with covering other elements, such as why I like the episode so much and what it does well. I've chosen these episodes based on how they, 1, impact the overall story, 2, how they portray their respective entity, and 3, based on my own personal experience, if I like them or not. I know that memorable, self-contained statements/episodes and important plot statements/episodes will be my main focus, as those are the most interesting, but there will be some wild cards here and there. I also chose these episodes based on, 4, how I ranked episodes of the Magnus Archives, using some overly complicated math that I didn't really need to, so check out my ranking videos to be familiarized with my opinions. Heavy spoilers for the entirety of the Magnus Archives, as I will be discussing these episodes with the full knowledge of 200 episodes. You have been warned. Enjoy. It's green because of the Magnus Archives.
I know the eye, fear of being watched, right?
Being watched, being followed, having your deepest secrets exposed, needing to know, even if your discoveries might destroy you. The feeling that something, somewhere, is letting you suffer just so it can watch.
The fear of being watched, of having your every single movement seen, of having your secrets exposed. The fear of always being surveyed, always being looked at. A different sort of fear, more about comfort and security, of being followed and judged constantly, of being scrutinized. To me, this fear is different because there is no aspect of danger or pain, nothing that tells you instinctually to run away. It's a learned fear, something distinctly human to it. Perhaps there is an evolutionary advantage to fearing being seen, like hiding from a predator that wants to kill you, but that's more akin to the hunt or to the end. The eye is simply watching, simply seeing. It's hard for me to think about the eye in terms of fear because it's not one of my own. But the fear is there for some people, and to the core of it, it's about comfort and consent. I do not want to be watched. There's a distinct feeling to being watched, even if you can't see who it is. And just the fact that you are being known is scary. The Eye in the Magnus Archives holds a very important part for the show, and it's obvious why. With John Sims, Elias Bouchard, Gertrude Robinson, the Magnus Institute and Jonah Magnus, the final ritual that started the change, the Webb's plan, it's all surrounding the eye. However, unfortunately, I'm sorry, I do not enjoy the eye's treatment in the series that much. Overall, I'm kind of bored with it. Not because of how prevalent it is. I think its prominence is very well handled, and it's not oversaturated at all. But it's how the eye is used in its individual episodes that I find is a little boring. For my count, there are only 12 episodes with statements or events that solely feature elements, aspects, or avatars of the eye, not counting overlapping episodes. Something I hadn't mentioned before in my prior fear exploration videos, but the way I make these decisions is based on the focus of the horror. When I mean overlapping episodes, I mean episodes whose moments of horror are focused on different fear entities. When I set out to make this series, like I said, I quantified my rankings. Have I told you guys that? I quantified my rankings. I did math that I didn't need to do. I quantified my rankings for all the 5 seasons, assigning each individual episode a score. I don't want to go into how much it was unnecessary, but I just needed to make it more unbiased in what's ranked and stuff like that. Whatever. I didn't want repeats, so each episode had to be sorted into one individual category. One of the 15 fears, or a larger group of other. However, there are many episodes whose moments of horror are split between two or more fears, these overlapping episodes that I continually mention. For example, an easy example is episode 100, I Guess You Had to Be There, whose moments of horror, which are more like absurdist horror, but there's still moments of horror focused on, are split between different fears. Off the top of my head, Desolation, Buried, Spiral, I think that's it. Lonely, yeah, they're all there, and you can say that that episode is for that specific fear, but they all have equal weight to them, and there's multiple of them, right? And so instead of trying to just choose one singular for that episode specifically, this episode was sorted into other. Some episodes may feature two or more entities, but it's usually easy to see which is the main focus of that episode, which is how I organized them. For example, one of the ones I've already covered, so that, a basis of understanding, 109 Nightfall has a representation of the hunt and the dark, almost equal weight, because the hunt characters and the dark monster, not avatar, the cult, yeah. But the episode focuses its horror on the dark, so it was labeled in dark. The eye gave me the most issues when I began organizing, as not only is there a decision of which fear is being focused, but also how it's being delivered. 82 Eyewitnesses and 142 Scrutiny are similar in that it is an avatar of the eye, Jonah and John, respectively, pulling a statement about a different entity. Eyewitnesses focuses its horror on the slaughter, while Scrutiny features the buried. Based on individual importance and treatment, I'd have to sort them separately. 82 into the slaughter and not I, and 142 into I but not buried, as those are the important parts of their individual episodes. So, as I said, by my account, there are 12 episodes whose important focus is on the I and the fear of being watched. If Jonah is being Jonah and John is being John, depending on the contents of the episode, it may be sorted differently. As usual, I'll do a rapid fire opinion list of all those episodes at the end of this to show which ones I've included in this list, and you can tell me which ones you think should have been in the I list or not. So yes, all this to say, it was hard for me to pick episodes to choose for my top 3 from, and also, unfortunately, it was hard to choose my overall top 3. I find overall that the episodes for the hour are either uninteresting, boring, or just not scary. And that's just a me thing. I can understand, obviously, if some other episodes that I don't find that scary or other people find scary. That's 100% understandable. This is my video. This is my opinions. So, the eye's presence within individual episodes is boring to me. However, the prominence of the eye within the overall plot is very, very well implemented, very well maintained, and sustained, which I enjoy. In comparison to the hunt, whose the sum of the parts is greater than the whole, the eye's whole is great. eye's whole. The eye's whole is greater than the sum of the parts. And similarly to The Dark and Desolation, it has very, very specific motifs, but even more prominence in those motifs than those of the Dark Desolation and the wishy-washiness of the hunt. The episodes the eye features in have the most variety, which is compounded by the differences in focus and delivery. The delivery which being something other fears don't have to deal with. Like I said, the motifs and themes that the story returns to with the eye are very specific and easy to point out, while being aided by the importance of the eye in the plot. It also allows for interesting interpretations and manifestations in individual episodes. Sometimes these manifestations end up being pretty boring to me, but at least an attempt was attempted. What I want to do is look at the 3 episodes I've chosen about the eye and use them to explore the things that I like about the eye and the small amount of things that I don't. As I said before, I'm making this series in ascending order from the entities I least like to most like. So, of 15, the eye is number 12. I'll let y'all guess the top 3. For the eye, the 3 episodes I've chosen are 53 Crusader, 148 Extended Surveillance, and 193 A Stern Look.
One other thing. That feeling of being watched, have you ever had it since?
Well, I wasn't sure whether to say anything, but yes, I have, just now. That funny turn I took on the way down the stairs. I felt it again. All those eyes watching me.
Statement number 9970509, Sergeant Walter Heller recording regarding a discovery made near Alexandria during Operation Crusader in November of 1941. Statement recorded September 5th, 1997, released February 22nd, 2017. Brief summary of this episode. Gertrude takes a statement of Walter Heller about his time in the Second World War. He tells about Operation Crusader, manning Crusader tanks in Libya, fighting and tallying with 3 other soldiers, as well as the heat and the need to see far for survival in combat. During one fight, their tank is damaged and his leg is wounded, leading him to be dragged out and witnesses one of the men, Dickie, burning alive in the tank. He's taken to the medics in Alexandria and begins walking to help the healing process, which is when he gets lost. While trying to regain his bearings, he stumbles into an old room filled with ancient scrolls and discovers the decaying corpse of a knight from the Crusades, their eyes gouged out. His light goes out and he sees a robed figure appear despite the darkness, only seeing a glimpse of a single lidless eye before fleeing. Gertrude asks him if he's replaced the grate and if he felt the feeling of being watched again, and he says he did when he came to the archives. Gertrude wants to look over some maps and impresses on him how this is off the record. In a different recording, Gertrude discusses the presence of a different archives and her need to prepare to deal with the robed figure. John's recording has him contemplating the archivist's position and then is interrupted by Martin, and then he mentions Heller dying in 2004 and an explosion in Alexandria in 1998, further bringing into question Gertrude's actions. From the get-go, I was on the fence to including this episode in the top 3 because of how this episode is 2 small statements in one. However, unlike other episodes within this format, one of these mini-statements is not overtly another fear entity. In an episode like 43, Section 31, which has Basira give 2 mini-statements on the desolation in the end, both with the horror focused on their fears, this would make the episode labeled an other instead of one or the other. Or, I guess here, desolation and end. Both have equal weight to them, and so I can't, with good conscience, put episode 43 in either end or desolation. It has to be in other. In Crusader, the mini statement, the burning tank, could be viewed as desolation, and I used to assign this episode to desolation and I, but it's not overtly mentioned as desolation. There's no connection to anything supernatural here. The second mini statement is obviously connected to the I, so that's why I decided to allow for this episode to be in this category and allow myself to talk about this episode. I almost didn't include this episode because I felt like the split statement was too much, but I enjoyed it too much to not include it. I used to have episode 188 Center of Attention along with Extended Surveillance and A Stern Look, but Center of Attention's statement is standalone like 148 while also still compelling, but Crusaders offers more for the plot overall. So I could talk about 188 and just, the really cool writing there, but it's not going to connect anything to the plot. In fact, it's near the end of the plot anyways. So this episode, I wanted to include. It also begins John's arc dealing with being the archivist, as well as continuing Gertrude's mystery in season 2 as to what is she, what has she been doing? She's dead. What was she doing? Adding to her mystique throughout the season. This episode is very interesting because this is the third episode with a different non-reoccurring voice actor. The first being 13 Alone with Naomi Hearn, and the second being 34 Anatomy Class with Dr. Lionel Elliott. And 2, this is the second episode featuring Gertrude. John having been given this tape last episode, 52 Exceptional Risk, by Basira. He mentioned that the tape was labeled as Alexandria. And so this is that episode. And here, Walter Heller, voiced by Harvey Kesselman, is butt up against Sue Sims, a phenomenal voice actress that I absolutely adore. If you're a fan of the channel, you've heard me wax philosophically. Is that the right term? You've heard me enjoy Sue Sims so much. Harvey Kesselman's delivery of Walter is so great and so different to what we're used to. Most of the voice actors have been relatively young, but Harvey Kesselman brings a sense of depth with his age, much like Sue Sims brings. Hearing these two old people talk to each other is cool, and when they're just talking to each other, their old personness feels distinct, and I like it.
Now, I need to check some maps with you, but I don't think we need that on tape. Are you all right here for now?
Well, I should be.
It's unlikely to happen, but if anyone else comes down here...
I'll tell them I'm an old friend of yours, paying you a visit.
Thank you. This statement is off the record, and I don't want anyone to bother you about it further. Let's keep it between us.
The statement of the Crusader tank is terrifying on its own, especially because it lacks the supernatural trappings of other statements. Operation Crusader actually happened, running from November 18th to December 30th, 1941, by the British 8th Army against Lieutenant General Erwin Rommel in North Africa. In a surprise attack, it intended to bypass Axis defenses on the Egyptian-Libyan frontier, defeat the Axis armed forces near Tobruk, raise the siege of Tobruk, and reoccupy Cyrenaica. It resulted in an Allied victory, claiming the eastern region of Libya for the Allied forces. Actual history. Heller says he was part of the 2nd Royal Gloucestershire Hussars, being a volunteer regiment created in 1830 and still active today. It's not a fictional thing, that's an actual group, the Hussars. They also took part in the Second Boer War and the Great War itself. Heller says that the Hussars weren't originally part of the operation, but joined in quickly when Rommel began fighting back. Heller's brother Francis had died in the Battle of Arras in 1940 in Belgium, where the Axis forces were also led by Erwin Rommel. The men Heller fought with were Frank Malloy, Ralph McCulloch, and Dickey. Heller regrettably not knowing his second name. And they fight Italian M13/40s, or M1340s. Is that how military people say it? Whatever. Having destroyed 3 of them himself, as Heller was the gunner. The detailing of the overall action and the last fight is littered with interesting, and for lack of a better term, blink and you'll miss it moments that focus on sight and seeing. With the fire of the tank, it could be said that the statement focuses on the fear of burning, the desolation, with motifs of heat. But I argue that the horror focuses on aspects of the eye here as well. I've always had good eyes, you see, and you really need that for the gun. It's all very well for Frank to point out a speck on a horizon and give us the order to fire, but I'm the one that needs to line up the shot close to a mile away and turn a Nazi tank into a smoldering brick before they can do the same to us. Much of what Heller had to do was train his eye to spot the danger, to aim, and to shoot before they do. I like how it sets the stakes first. And a Crusader, well, for all its advantages, it didn't have very much in the way of ventilation, so we were spending a lot of time trapped in what was more or less a mobile oven. We begin with the mental image of an oven. He describes having to wipe sweat from his eyes, having to spot a tank in the distance despite the hazy vision from the heat, and then the flash of light reflecting off the binoculars of the enemy tank. The prose focuses on what Heller could see and couldn't see, the things he saw being the moments of tension and fear. It was strange, but even with the intense sunlight reflecting off that endless expanse of bright desert, I still remember seeing the flash of their gun. And then, paying off from the setup prior, the most horrifying moment is Dickie left in the mobile oven, burning. There's nothing supernatural here. No entities are manipulating the circumstances. This is something that could have happened in the theater of war, and that's terrifying. Heller also focuses on his inability to help, having to witness it all. So I had to lie there and listen to Dickie roast to death. I didn't know how long it took, but it felt like hours. Being unable to not witness this horror, another aspect of I. The second part of the statement in Alexandria is the most important aspect to the episode. The events are quick, less focused on, mostly because Heller was fleeing so quickly. After the burning of the Crusader, he was taken to Alexandria to heal his leg, and he healed well despite a limp. He says, so all told, it was a pretty good wound to get, which to me is one of the saddest and scariest aspects of a war, that there is such a thing as a good wound. Because of the constant movement of soldiers and locals, he decided to walk further away to avoid the noise, which is when he stumbles upon the Cherupian. It's a very good writing that his skills established in the tank section return here. From somewhere far beyond the grate, as the setting sun fell on it, came the glint of something round and white. It was only for a second, and if I hadn't spent so long trained to spot objects that distance, I probably wouldn't have noticed it, but there was definitely something there. He pushes through the grate and finds the old scrolls and the corpse of the Crusader knight. I really enjoy the detail. I tried to tell myself that it was just the way the skull had warped over the years that made him look like he was screaming. It's a really great imagery to get you, the audience, to imagine how a decayed skull could look like it's still screaming. That's really great horror imagery to get you to imagine that without telling you. That's really smart writing there. And it's heavily implied that the eyes were gouged out, and it's implied that this is what killed the knight, and also what presumably made them die screaming. Because obviously they died screaming. Heller feels like he's being watched, and when he tries leaving, his flashlight turns off. This is important because he drills in on how he shouldn't see in the dark. There was no light to see it. I can't explain it, even really describe how it felt, but it was absolute darkness, and I could still see. He also feels a strong sense of being watched, an almost oppressive presence that threatens to keep him rooted. It's hard to imagine this moment because how could this feel? This is the I watching Heller. He says he felt it when he came to the archives. It's a tense, scary moment that I usually don't get from the I in the show. Then the robed figure appears. It wore what looked like remains of an ancient robe. In the darkness, I could see long, spindly fingers stretching, probing towards me. From within its huge flowing hood, I could see nothing except a single, lidless eye. He then flees, not giving any more description. I like that there's an implication here that the archivist, that lidless figure, is making Heller see in the darkness. This feels like an eye power to make you see the horrible thing where people usually close their eyes or turn away or just, be glad that they're in darkness. No, you will see this, even if there is no light. Also, the added detail of a lidless eye, whether from desiccation or removal, is sickening. I love it. Like, for an archivist, the monster, were the eyelids removed by themselves, or perhaps, I don't know, an avatar that created them? Or did they just rot the eyelid off and it's just now has no skin? No skin. That is just there's no answer. There doesn't need to be an answer. It's really fun to imagine how did it get to having no lids. Gertrude discusses the Cerupian of Alexandria. A Cerupian, I learned, is a temple or other religious institution dedicated to Serapis, the combined form of Osiris and Apis, I guess. This being a branch of the Library of Alexandria. Gertrude talks about it fulfilling the function, and I believe this is either about being an archive, like Institute, or the setting for a ritual. but I think her focus is both, and it doesn't really matter which one it is. She cites different historical accounts for how the Cerupium was destroyed, and one source says that it was a group of people who sang the night, which is implied to be an attack from agents of the dark. Okay, so there's a lot of implications coming. I like using that word. She notes how the corpse may be a knight from the Crusades, specifically the sack of Alexandria in 1365 by Peter I of Cyprus, which was not religiously motivated. And there's another implication. Let's use synonyms. There's another suggestion here, along with Gertrude's musings of its function and the attack from the agent of the dark, that the Crusades were to foil a ritual of the eye, or at least weaken a stronghold of the eye. That's the suggestion that's being presented. If so, this adds to the evidence that rituals for the fears fail because of interactions and interferences from other fears. The ritual's not powerful enough to bring in one fear individually. John states later that there was an explosion in Alexandria 6 months later, killing 17 people, which further infers that Gertrude exploded the remains of the Cerupium to avoid any eye-based group from growing stronger. She also contemplated how to deal with the robed figure, saying she needed to be more careful. Probably that's what led her to exploding the gas main, so that she'd have to deal with all that. She likes explosions. Gertrude likes explosions, and it's the, what's the term, lowest hanging fruit for her, and it works. It works. Yeah, there's a lot of implications here, but nothing concrete, I have to say. Here, Gertrude names the label archivist and thinks that the robed figure used to be an archivist as well. John begins to contemplate being an archivist, to think about being part of a chain. He's then interrupted by Martin, who mentions he still does not believe John stabbed himself with a butter knife, I think it was, which recalls episode 47, The New Door, when Michael Distortion stabbed John's hand when John was trying to get Helen Richardson back. The archivist's position/label is further explored after this episode. In different moments, different avatars call John the archivist, which frustrates him because the title means more to them than it does to him. In 92 Nothing Beside Remains, John claims the title of the archivist when Elias is telling him about the unknowing. Elias says, "It's your job to chronicle these things, to experience them, whether firsthand or through the eyes of others." He also drills in John's choice to further the archivist role. "You never wanted this, no, but I'm afraid you absolutely did choose it. In 100 ways, at 100 thresholds, you pressed on. You sought knowledge relentlessly, and you always chose to see." It's funny that in 93 Contaminant, Georgie questions why Elias chose John to be an archivist, towing at the revelation that Jonah chose John to be the archivist. But that gets brushed under the rug a little bit quickly. It is kind of funny. And as John continues learning, eventually he begins to call himself the archivist in the beginning of recordings in season 4. John fulfills the role of the archivist that is set up by Walter Heller. All of the moments John takes his statements of others, such as in 141 Doomed Voyage with Floyd Matharu and 142 Scrutiny with Jess Tyrell, is John fulfilling the role of the archivist. The archivist causes the apocalypse, perhaps what Gertrude was attempting to stop in the explosion at Cerupium. And this comes full circle when in 191, What We Lose, when John asks Martin if he remembers Heller's statement of the old archivists as they are now guarding the Institute. And in 192, An Appointment, John is able to control them, being the Eye's Antichrist. John's journey with becoming the archivist starts with him learning about it in this statement. Gertrude's mysterious machinations are coming to the forefront in future episodes in season 2. We will learn a lot more explodey things that Gertrude's doing. And the eye continues to become more prevalent within the plot more and more as we keep going through.
I mean, it's fine. I can get other jobs, and it's not like I really want to be working there after what happened, but I just wish someone would take it seriously. It's messed up, and I'm having a real hard time getting it out of my head.
Statement number 0110-304 of Sunil Maharaj regarding their work as a security guard and the disappearance of their co-worker Samson Stiller, released August 8th, 2019. Brief summary of this episode: Basira assaults Elias in prison, punishing him for feeding her incorrect information about Nai Elisund, which he waves away as a miscalculation. He confesses to have known about John's eating habits and tells him to stay out of Annabelle Cain's way. Basira threatens him, and Elias says goodbye to her, no longer wanting to see her. Basira tells John about meeting Elias, and John had hoped Elias would have some advice about controlling his urges. They argue about it, using Daisy as an example of whether or not it's healthy to resist the avatar hunger. Basira advises to get a statement and see if he can find anything about Annabelle. John asks about Martin, and Basira says he left a note without showing himself. And John begins reading Sunil's statement about working security at malls with Samson Stiller and needing to work with an old CCTV system. Samson takes on the job, becoming more and more obsessed with the old system, and Sunil becomes worried when he notices weird things, such as Samson never leaving the mall, being followed by cameras that shouldn't move, and having a crack in his eye. He takes off for a week to get away and only returns when other co-workers call in panic, saying that Samson won't go away on the monitors. Samson is noted as missing, but he still shows up in the cameras watching Sunil. John laments that he doesn't feel as good reading an older statement and doesn't care if Sunil was taken by Samson or not. This episode was probably one of the first episodes of The Eye that made me actually horrified the first time. That was the first listen through. Terrified me. Other Eye episodes had like one or two small moments that I reacted to, but this statement's building up of tension is really well done. It doesn't connect to anything in the plot, but it is still memorable despite that. Basira beating up Elias is fallback to being sent to Nai Elisund on his false information, as he has said in 135 Dark Matter that the People's Church was amassing forces there, which is a lie. We know this. Hey y'all, we know this. He knows about John taking statements from innocent people and knows about Annabelle Cain, with this episode coming right off of 147 Weaver, with John, Basira, Melanie, and Daisy searching Hilltop Road and finding Annabelle's statement. Basira is starting to suss out that Elias/Jonah is planning something bigger with John, about John, and that's why he decides to not see her anymore. Like, he knows she's on to him. He's like, you know what? You've done all that you need to, and doesn't meet with her anymore. And this is also the reason he refuses to meet with John, as he worries John's burgeoning powers will alert him of Jonah's plans. He says this at the end of the season. This episode is one of many in season 4 where Basira and John butt heads, mostly Basira being angry with John over one thing or another. Here, John says he can't believe Basira was meeting Elias, her source, as she had been hiding it, and she retaliates with, oh yeah, that's a terrible secret sabotaging the trust between us. Whenever he asks something of her, she responds angrily, using something he did in the past to jab at him, which he takes almost without comment. This could feel very harsh and mean, and, well, it does. It feels very harsh and mean, but then he asks if she's seen Martin, and then she responds less harshly. And this shows that her anger is just a mixture of frustration and irrationality, just lashing out. But when John attempts to be a little bit more vulnerable, asking about Martin, she lets off. Not apologizing, but also not attacking him when he is vulnerable. If Basira was actually a bad person, she'd hurt him there too, but she doesn't. And the situation they're both in causes so much friction and tension. And this shift in emotion in the middle of the conversation shows how human Basira is. Flawed and angry, just like John and Melanie and Daisy. Hands will be thrown if you speak a word against Basira. Now here they connect briefly over the issue of Martin self-isolating. With the knowledge that Peter Lucas is planning something, there's been brief moments of Martin avoiding other characters, which saddens John and worries Basira, as we eventually see in 151 Big Picture when she tells Martin, as far as I can see, you're either compromised or you're being played, and I want to know which. She never saw Martin leave the tape with a note, and John asks what it said. And Basira, knowing that John and Martin had a thing, tells him. The note said, talk to him. And she knows that they had a thing, and she knows that John's being vulnerable and doesn't attack him there. Now to the statement. Great writing, great setup with Sunil saying he quit his job and that his job even wanted him gone because he kept asking about Samson, who disappeared while on the job. He describes working security and being moved around, which was fine with him, but sucked more for Sam because he had a wife and a child. And I like the detail that Sunil can't legally name where he worked, but it'd be easy to look up anyways. That has happened prior. I forget which episode, but that idea of like, I'm not going to talk about where I worked, but like, you guys can look it up. When they find the old control room for the security system in their newest job, the description of Samson's reaction is very telling. He'd apparently been an engineer back in the day, and something about all those old surveillance systems all tied together, all wrapping into and around each other like some weird nest of cameras, it really seemed to appeal to him. There's a feeling of something unnerving with this description of like the surveillance systems wrapping into each other into a nest. Feels very organic. Samson does manage to make it all work, except for one system, which is when he seals his fate. Instead of giving up, he pushes further and seeks the knowledge. Along with his affinity for the cameras, this adds to the tragedy. I mean, I'd have just left it, obviously, but I think Samson was taking the whole knowing how the system worked thing as like a point of pride. Something he could salvage from the whole situation. Just a way of getting some control over his life, you know? Deliberate choices causing consequences. And then he finds a pamphlet. Can't have been more than 10 pages of A5 in the whole thing, yellowed and water damaged. Well used, though. Someone had even put their name in the front, like they were afraid people were going to steal a manky instruction book. And that name? Albert Einstein. No, it's never described. However, because of later events and the added baggage of the entire show, it's heavily hinted at that this pamphlet is a Leitner in some form or way. I mean, which other guy puts his names in front of books? It's Leitner. When Sam finds it, he reads it for like 4 hours, and Sunil catches a glimpse of the pages, seeing a black and white photo of himself. And then Sam turns. His eyes were all messed up, like weird and glassy. Definitely a Leitner doing its thing. The things that happen next with Sam are all very, very creepy. And all of the descriptions, it's just really good descriptions. He never leaves work, and one time he almost threatens Sunil when he wanted to stay, having an array of monitors begin to turn off. And he could see himself, Sunil could see himself in one of them. And I got this feeling deep in my gut that if that last monitor turned off, then something really bad was going to happen to me. He decides to leave, and this ambiguous danger is so terrifying, trying to imagine what could have happened if he stayed. Sunil described feeling watched in the mall and having the cameras pointed at him, and the fact that they are not articulated, but still moving, is terrifying. Samson is making sure Sunil knows that he's being watched, and when he throws a can of deodorant at them, the imagery is even further chilling. There was a crack right down the center of his eye. I adore that. Makes you want to try to imagine how his eye would look. How would that look in real life? To look at someone's eye and see it cracked. Sunil takes a break, but gets a call from Dave, a co-worker he's mentioned prior, and he's panicking. He kept saying, what do we do with his eyes? I mean, I don't know what the hell to say. I just kept quiet listening to Dave as he started sobbing down the phone. He won't stop, he said. We can't get rid of his face. This feels chilling, hearing a grown man panicking to the point of crying, and how Sam cannot stop watching them. What do we do with his eyes? What does that mean? Sunil reiterates how he kept asking questions, recalling the mentions of quitting because they wanted him to quit. Sam had disappeared, and Sunil had found his shirt torn to shreds wrapped around the Leitner manual. He asked why Samson hadn't signed out before disappearing, and why it's always Samson who logs on when someone else resets the system. It's evident that Sam became part of the CCTV system by being consumed by the Lightner. Either the system has taken his likeness or Sam has become part of the system. I'm partial to becoming, as taking his likeness seems more cliche, while Sam purposely joining in feels more insidious and more aligned with what we've seen in the archives before. Especially as Sunil states that when he's alone, he sees Samson on the screen staring at him, calling Sam to join him. He doesn't describe how he does it. I assume it's sort of like something along those lines, maybe. And this further adds to the evidence that Sam went in by himself. This low-tech scare feels like a creepypasta, which is not a dig at all to this writing. Sam watching Sunil when he's alone implies further developments, as most creepypastas do. And as most great horrors do, it does not give us closure, allowing the audience to fill in the gaps of what's going to happen. The imagination is scarier than reality. Also, the feel of this horror is really interesting. We associate these old systems with both a sense of unreliability and an unease of not knowing how they truly work. These old machines no longer work and you must find instructions to fix them. This is also familiar to us. We've seen this before. We may have had to do this before. When you combine this with the unknown of these eldritch horrors, we, the audience, do the legwork of bridging the familiar unreliability of the old with the unfamiliar horror of the fears. The fact that Samson willingly searched and found the Lightner manual, all to be able to fix it, is scary. It's not much highlighted, but this could have happened to Sunil if he decided to do it. The tragedy is also compounded when you remember that Sam chose to do all this despite having a family. Something so horrifyingly powerful turned Sam away from his former life and turned him into a monster, a conduit for the fear of being watched. That's terrifying. John's after statement is both funny and tragic. He continues a metaphor of fear being food, saying he doesn't feel as satisfied. He muses a bit if consuming an eye statement is like auto-cannibalism, which I think so. He says he's re-consuming secondhand terror, which I think all the statements are that, but whatever. Only when he has a live victim is he eating well. Martin had asked Jess Tyrell if John looked like he hadn't slept in a long time, and she says that after taking her buried statement, John looked like he'd eaten a whole steak. In this episode, John worries how reading simple statements isn't getting him what he needs, these diminishing returns. He states not caring that if Sunil was taken by Sam or not, a subversion of what he usually does at the end of the statement, something he calls proper digestion. All right, John, we get it. We eventually never get to learn if Sunil is killed or not, and that's scary in and of itself, his being held in a limbo state in our minds. What is that? Schrodinger's Sunil? Overall, despite this episode's statement not being connected to the overall plot and John not really learning anything important here, the focus and feeling of the horror is really intriguing. And like I said, one of the few episodes that I actually felt scared about. This episode is saved a bit more by Basir and Elias moving around John and the plot, bringing further plot points together. Inconsequential, but fun nonetheless.
Just shut up, Christ!
He can't hear you.
So what? He's not aware of us, of any of this?
No. Or if he is, it's only as a minuscule speck amongst the flood of knowledge and fear that's passing through him. He has become the conduit between this new world and the thing that watches it. It's all running through him.
Sounds awful.
Statement. Pound, 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 dash 33. An examination of Elias Bouchard, recorded by the archivist in C2, released February 4th, 2021. A brief summary of the episode. John and Martin see Elias/Jonah being a conduit for the Eye, experiencing and chanting about all of the horror in the Eye apocalypse. After a brief moment almost being taken by the Eye, John and Martin try to decide what to do with Jonah, with Martin asking if they can pull him down. He then asks if Jonah's original body is something they can use against him, but John knows that the body was destroyed. And then Martin asks if the original Elias Bouchard is still there. John thinks, which causes Jonah/Elias to stop chanting and begins the statement. The original Elias Bouchard is having his interview to work at the Institute with James Wright, and Jonah/Elias speaks as James. James asks Elias what he's afraid of, and Elias is afraid James knows that he's high. But then he realizes he's not high, it's just a familiar paranoia he's had. He then responds with spiders, and Wright makes him feel spiders walk all over him. He then asks if he ever experienced anything supernatural, and Elias remembers finding the body of his friend Alan, and then of Alan finding an old book and becoming paranoid about it, saying that something saw him through the book and is coming, feeling its way towards him. Elias gets Alan high, and when he returns, Alan's been killed. He asks why he wants a job and remembers his father sternly pressuring him to do something with his life, as well as his funeral and feeling that he was destined for something more. He's asked why he's here and why he heeded the call before seeing a premonition of what would be done to him, replacing his eyes with Jonah's. Jonah/Elias returns to intoning, and John tells Martin that if Elias's body is destroyed, the eye would just find someone else to channel the fear, using John as the new conduit, which is what the eye wants. There's a lot here. I adore this episode. There's heavy representation of the eye and subweb in here as well. And this is another great showcase of the soundscaping done for season 5. This episode comes right off of 192, An Appointment, when Martin and John discover Elias has become the pupil of the eye, and he's one. Martin begins the episode by asking what John means by that, and he explains. Throughout their conversation, Jonah/Elias is hanging in the background, intoning. And they do this really cool effect, which is a combination of 1, Ben Meredith as Elias speaking, 2, layering it over with static and distortion, like a second or third voice behind his, and 3, it being a constant stream of abstract horror. The transcript I found has it all written out, which is just this jumbled up mess of a stream of consciousness of horrifying things. And it reminds me a lot how it reads, like the creeping vine text in Jeff Vandermeer's Annihilation. Check that out. Martin talks about the body, which he saw in 158 Panopticon as Peter Lucas took him to the Panopticon underneath the Institute. He found Jonah's body was inside it, suggesting that he had to be there to be able to transfer his eyes. And Elias told Martin that he could kill him by destroying his body. It's alluded to throughout the show and also revealed eventually that Jonah has been body swapping, and now that the apocalypse has occurred, it's really interesting that the body has been destroyed. Ashes swept away by the winds of ecstatic terror. The eye is now sustaining Jonah's being. John begins to think about Elias Bouchard, OG, spurred on by Martin asking if Elias is still there and if they can reach him. An amazing moment here when Martin is brainstorming and Jonah/Elias stops chanting, something that seemed impossible, and it feels like he moves to be right next to John. Then it sounds like the world around them shifts to accommodate these two figures of the eye. We hear the familiar clock ticking of Elias's office, now James Wright's office, and paper shuffling as if James Wright himself is there looking at Elias's CV. Obviously, there's a big focus on his eyes, which Elias seems to remember. He's seen them all his life, watching him and judging him, cutting through him so no part of him was secret or safe. They peel away the armor, his carefree smiles and practiced shrugs. The power of the eye, seeing Elias as he truly is. John narrates and speaks as Elias, and then like his father, Elias's father. But Jonah speaks whenever James Wright would, as he was James Wright in the past. And it's like both John and Jonah are taken by the eye and forced to put on this play, the same compulsion that John has felt throughout the apocalypse, walking through the domains. There's weight to this moment, as if the whole world has stopped, as if reality has stopped to allow for these two to play these characters, John as Elias, Jonah as James. If you've seen my ranking video for season 5, you'll know how how excited I got about talking about this episode. Anyways, all of the questions James asks leads to Elias remembering moments. It's unknown if this actually happened or if it's colored by the future and the eye, but it's all still true, metaphorically at least. He's asked what he's afraid of, which he immediately conjures up the usual paranoia of someone knowing that Elias is high, which he immediately writes off because he knows that he's sober right now, making sure not to get high before doing this interview. But it's a reflex, an immediate reaction that Elias has because it's happened so much. Not knowing what else to say, Elias says spiders, and there's a quick moment here. Those eyes break contact for a moment, flicking up to the corner of the office where, at the edge of a bookshelf that sags with age and weight, a small cobweb has started to form. Throughout the interrogation, Wright has not torn his gaze from Elias, and the moment he looks away reveals the importance. The cobweb being formed is a signal from the web to Jonah that Elias is a candidate he needs for a new body. He makes Elias feel the fear of spiders crawling around him, the descriptions detailed and horrifying. And this recalls Elias punishing characters by making them experience something horrible, such as in 106 A Matter of Perspective, showing Melanie how her father actually died, and in 118 The Masquerade, showing Martin how much his mother hates him. Here, Elias becomes a victim of his powers, and because John is narrating it, we, the audience, become a victim of his powers, something we've never experienced before. When he finishes making Elias squirm, Wright has an air of satisfaction feeding from the fear. This also adds in fear from the web as well. He's asked if he's experienced anything supernatural, which makes Elias remember finding Alan's body. The details here are gory and horrifying, added with the soundscape of someone hacking with the smell, making it feel more visceral. I love the detail of Elias has no idea how much of the crimson that bathed the scene is from the blood on the walls, how much from the blood that tints the light bulb, and how much is simply the shading of his memory. This combination of a tainted memory with a true experience is something hard to parse apart, and I love this moment. Something very, I wouldn't say it's realism, but it's hard to figure out if something you remember is true memory or fabricated. Then he remembers Alan having found a book. Here, like in 148, it's implied to be a lightener, and then Elias looks at the book and sees just blank empty pages. This calls back to 127 Remains to be Seen and Albrecht von Closen's books, also with empty pages. Again, Elias questions his memory. Was the laughter really that cruel, or is it just a warping of memory? The past he tries to forget, mixed with the nightmares that came after, the faces he dreamed of seeing in those pages. Aspects of the eye coming back. Alan's book summons something.
It saw me, Alan keeps saying over and over again. It saw me through the pages, and it's coming. He sees it, he says, in every mirror, every distant doorway, a silhouette on every skyline, coming closer each and every time, finding its way towards him step by step. It has no eyes, Alan sobs, so it has to feel its way towards me. But it knows. It knows.
That is horrifying. The voice acting also adds to it. Shout out Johnny Sims. You don't need to get a shout out. You know what you did. Each new detail of this monster adds more and more horror to our imagination. Elias even describes it as half confession, half conspiracy theory, half urban legend, which is exactly what it sounds like. He then gets Alan high, again the soundscape having just a lighter flicking on, which is exactly how the monster finds Alan. Imagine being high and this thing that you have no idea what it is attacks you, rips out your eyes. It's like the Crusader and the Cherupian. Alan's eyes were taken. Wright asks Elias why he wants a job, and as he begins to recite what answers he prepared, he's forced to think about his father. The soundscape now adds in a distant piano, conjuring up the image of aristocracy and luxury, the Bouchards being rich, with his father talking down to Elias, showing his insecurity. Because of this line of questioning, Elias begins to doubt having heard of this position here, and Wright asks if he was drawn here, yes, against his will, no, and why he heeded the call. The subtle soundscape around John and Jonah takes a step back, so it feels like parallel moments. Wright asking Elias and Jonah asking John, and both of them responding, because this is the place I know I should be. Elias was summoned by the web, perhaps, or the eye itself, unknown which, but I like to think it was the web helping in Jonah's plan, giving him another body without family or friends to take over and elongate his life further, giving him more chances to continue his archive ritual. John here was summoned by the web or the eye, and in contrast, I feel like it's more eye than web, as we later know that the eye wants John to take over as the pupil. Either way, these are both really cool parallel moments that the soundscape tells us is for both of these characters. Then Elias gets a forward premonition, perhaps, of Jonah taking over his body. Or it could be what the original James Wright felt at being taken by Jonah. Either way, whether it is a premonition or repetition of a pattern, Elias is forced to watch this horror. The statement ends, and Jonah/Elias returns back to intoning, forgetting John and Martin totally. John tells Martin that he learned that the eye wants John to take over as pupil, and this would happen if they killed Jonah. This is a culmination of Jonah's story arc that ends with John killing him and replacing him in 200 Last Words, where he becomes a pupil of the eye and decides to destroy everything. This episode I'm also using as a vehicle to discuss part of Jonah's plans and the ritual of the eye. A lot of it is revealed in 160 The Eye Opens, which I've hedged around, and there have been many episodes prior, mainly in seasons 3 and 4, where Jonah's plan is occurring, anything he's manipulated that would lead John to be marked by the fears. Jonah wants immortality and power and fears death, which is why he pushed for, at first, the ritual of the eye. It was first mentioned in 111 Family Business by Jerry in the line of rituals Gertrude was working to stop. Of the 12 rituals that we learn about, web and corruption and extinction don't have rituals and the stranger gets 2, I would rank the Watcher's Crown at number 8. I'll touch on the rituals for the respective fear that I'm talking about, so I'll share their rank when I get to them. Jonah had Robert Smirk build Millbank Prison underneath the Institute, a fact we've known about since 41 Too Deep when John explored the tunnels. Jonah tricked Smirk into changing the panopticon and waited for years until he even attempted it. There's less description of the setup to it and more description of the collapse. All of the prisoners died by the end of it, assuming that the prisoners were being used to fuel the ritual, with the ritual eventually failing, but the Panopticon Center stayed as a source of power. I rank the Watcher's Crown as below the Extinguished Sun because it's not as complex and interesting, but definitely very important to the overall plot. It's very middle of the road for me. I could have used more detail, especially, in regards to the preparations of it, and more description. I'm fine with the breadcrumbs that we got, and I do think it's pretty cool that the Watchtower was left over for Jonah to use. There's not many rituals that have something left over. Extinguished Sun is one of them, but something very integral to the plot that is left over. Jonah says he was an old man when he first attempts and fails the ritual, wanting to avoid being taken over by any other succeeding ritual, which then eventually leads him to his plan for the archive ritual, which would make him the king of a changed world. Before he could figure that out, he had to prolong his life, leading to his body hopping. And we know in 167 Curiosity, he was Richard Mendelsohn, who was disappointed by the current archivist Angus Stacey. I guess it's implied that he tried to get Angus Stacey to be the ritual of the archive, but he failed. He died. He got his face ripped off. Whatever. We don't know if there was anyone between Magnus and Mendelsohn. I'm inclined to say no, but it doesn't really matter. Throughout Jonah's stint through Elias's body, there was moments that alluded to Elias being Jonah, such as in 96 Return to Sandor, with Sarah asking, "It's Elias now then?" And in 101 Another Twist, with Nikolai Orsanov asking if she can call him Elias. And it's a great revelation that Elias is Jonah at the end of season 4, something obvious at second or third glance, but the first time around, it's hidden in plain sight so well. Also, this revelation paints other moments in different lights. Almost every single manipulation Elias does gets revealed at the end of season 4. The manipulations to get John marked by the fears. Every moment in the past is colored now differently. Martin also notes that Elias knew about Sasha being killed and replaced by not Sasha. He also says the web may have nudged him and given him John, a blessing for his work, which we get near confirmation of at the end of the show. When John takes the eye's powers, leaving Jonah defenseless, he begins beating him, and Jonah pleads to John, saying he doesn't want to die. But John kills him for Sasha, for Gertrude, and all the people Jonah had hurt. And that's an amazing cathartic moment. Overall, this episode detailing the haunting past of the original Elias Bouchard has amazing weight to it, and one of my favorite episodes of season 5. The eye is focused here both in terms of the plot and from a different manifestation, Alan's book. And if Alan had been killed by any other different fear, then the episode would still have been amazing, and I still would have loved it. But the fact that there is an even deeper exploration of the eye adds to how great this episode is, as well as obviously beginning the endgame of the show. Final comments. These 3 episodes I like for different reasons. 53 Crusader has amazing voice acting and establishes an important arc for John. 148 Extended Surveillance has a terrifying manifestation of the eye and great writing, making it a memorable standalone statement. 193, A Stern Look, is a great intersection of John and Jonah's storylines, as well as amazing elements of horror and sound design. I would rank these episodes from best to least to best. 193, 553, 148, they're pretty close to each other. A lot of the eye is constrained to John and Elias/Jonah doing eye avatar stuff, from pulling statements to making characters experience events that they don't want to. It's mostly them. It's very prevalent in the show, the eye, and very well established, so much so that it's probably one of the easiest fears to point out in the story. It's, there's very easy to say which episodes in Protocol are the eye. A focus on eyes being seen and being forced to see. Because the actual fear is so specific, its depictions are very specific as well. Unfortunately, to me, the few times the eye is the focus of horror falls flat because of how frequently it appears. We experience it so much that we become almost desensitized to it, and this has led to me feeling a little bored. Only when the depictions deviate from the established aesthetics of the eye do I find myself, if not scared, at least intrigued. And when they push a bit more, then I can enjoy the horror for what it is. We're getting to a point where I have more positive things to say than negative things about the entities, the critiques being counterbalanced with praise. The eye toes this edge because I am trying to balance the intellectual criticism with my own opinions. And if you would have asked me what my least favorite Dread Power was a year ago, it would have been the eye. But once I looked at how my rankings, shook out, I was surprised that it wasn't so low. Either way, the entire body of work of the eye surpasses the individual successes and failures, for better or for worse. John's entire story arc is sustained by his interaction with the eye, from his decisions to his reluctance, from his fear of being a monster to his use of its powers, from his connections with the other characters to his connections with his own humanity. The eye is important to John, and the way that Johnny Sins wraps this struggle into the story is amazing, especially within season 4. Of the other episodes focused on the eye, once again, these episodes are the ones where the eye is the focus of the horror, so some other episodes with significant eye moments may be part of other fears, and this is all by my own discretion. 160, The Eye Opens, is an amazing episode. I will talk about it in the future. Trust me, it needs its own space beyond just talking about the eye. 1 through 8, The Architecture of Fear has an amazing world building and ties up Smirk's storyline, but I feel like the focus on the extinction brings the eye-based horror down in comparison. Like there's less extinction horror, but more extinction and like other fear world building discussions. And then there's just, the sparkling of eye horror with smirk that makes it eye focused and not extinction. Either way, it's a really good episode, but I just couldn't like talk about it because of that. 188 Center of Attention, like I said, was in the trio, the top 3 before I replaced it with 53. And as a standalone episode within season 5, it holds up as one of the few eye-focused episodes with terrifying moments. Like, I think about that, I forget her name. I'm so sorry. The lesbian woman who is stuck in London and she keeps being, the structure of that episode is really fun. And this is what I would have talked about. The structure of the episode is really fun because it sort of like goes to different ways to escape and how there's you can never escape the eye. And then the eye begins growing in the wall. Love that. 142 Scrutiny, as I've mentioned before, has buried-based horror with a very creepy description. I love the idea of like a hand reaching and grabbing your leg and you realize that it's coming from the wrong direction. Love that. But the revelation that our protagonist has been doing this to people is more horrifying conceptually. Like, this is a betrayal now. And I wanted to streamline this video, so it's a very honorable mention, but there's a lot of happening here. And sort of the idea of like split statements, more there's buried stuff and then there's eye stuff. I knew I was going to mention anyways. Those were the ones I really liked. 60, The Observer Effect has a great concept, but a weak execution. It was better in the beginning than the end. Like, she was going to go explode the Institute. Like, alright, whatever. 19 Confessions and 20 Desecrated Host feel like a jumble of multiple fears, with I being the main one. But I don't really enjoy, like, 19, he's talking about, I think 19 should be more spiral, but I wanted to have both of them in the same place. So, yeah, 19, Mentis, and Wants Your Faith. And then Desecrated Host. Honestly, they should be mostly spiral, but it's like mainly eye imagery. It's hard to say. I should have not even included 1920 in this, but it's whatever. I don't like them. I don't like them at all. I'm not going to talk about them again. 32 Schwarzwald implies a lot, and you have to jump through many hoops to get to the horror. I don't like that. 127 Remains to Be Seen suffers from the same as 23, but worse, also with multiple hoops to jump through, along with different clashing interpretations that jumble the horror into something uninteresting. Obviously, these are my own opinions, so I would love to hear what you think about the eye. Let me know why you like the eye, which episodes are great showcases of the eye for you, or other ways that the eye could be used in terrifying ways. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and share with your friends. Keep an eye out for the next Fear and Fantasy Exploration video. Not sure when it's going to be coming out, but it's going to be coming out between the definite chugging along videos for Magnus Protocol as they come out. And so keep an eye on that. Don't forget to be passionate, and I'll see y'all later.